welcome back to my channel. I hope that you're doing well. Welcome to another video and welcome back to another wrap up. Today I'm going to be sitting down and discussing all of the books that I read in the month of February, how I did, my stats, all that fun stuff, and hopefully this will be a quicker video than usual because I didn't read as much as I usually do. So this is of course a cozy wrap up, so grab yourself a drink. My bevy of choice today is water because I am severely dehydrated, but feel free to grab yourself a hot chocolate or a coffee or whatever you would like. Get something cozy on and let's talk about books. So I'm going to start this video off talking about my stats. I'm going to go over all of my stats for the entire month and then we'll jump into the actual books themselves. So I'm going to start off by saying that I was able to read a total of 15 books this month. Not as good as I usually do. Usually I'm in the 16 and up category, but I read some chunkier books this month. I had a little bit of reading slump. I was going through some life stuff, so that definitely reflected itself in my reading. However, 15 is still a fantastic number, so I'm not complaining. Over those 15 books, I was able to read 5,315 pages, which is an average of about 190 pages a day, and an average book size of about 354 pages. I listened to a total of 160 audiobook hours this month. As for my formats, it was pretty easy this month. I read 11 mixed media books and 4 audiobooks. As for my star ratings, I rated 5 4 stars, 4 4 stars, 3 3 stars, 1 2 star, 1 1 star, and 1 book that I DNF'd, so I did not rate it. As for my genre breakdown, I read 6 romances, 5 fantasies, 2 contemporaries, 1 nonfiction, and 1 magical realism. For the age ranges this month, I read 8 adult books, 1 new adult book, 5 young adult books, and 1 middle grade. As for my representation, I read 4 books where it was represented in the main character, 4 books where it was present in a side character, and 7 books that didn't have any representation at all, which is actually quite incredible because that means I read more books with rep than without. And for the representation breakdown, I read 3 books with mental health rep, 3 books with illness rep, and 2 books with disability rep. Then for my LGBTQI+ breakdown, I read 4 books where the main character was part of the community, 4 books where a side character was part of the community, and 7 books without representation at all, which again means that I read more books with representation than without. And again, for that breakdown, I read 3 books with lesbian rep, 2 books with gay rep, 2 books with bisexual rep, and 1 book with transgender rep. Now for my POC representation, I read 11 books written by people of color, and 4 books where the author was not a person of color, and I read 10 books where the character was a person of color, and 5 books without. This month, I read 12 books written by women, 2 books written by men, and 1 book written by a non-binary author. I read 10 books this month that were part of a series, 5 that were standalones, and I finished 5 series this month. 14 of the books that I read this month I read for the very first time, and 1 of them was a reread. 13 of those books I owned myself, 1 I borrowed from a friend, and 1 I borrowed from the library. Now for my publication years, I read 2 books published in 2022, 5 books published in 2021, 3 books published in 2020, 2 books published in 2019, 2 books published in 2018, 1 book published in 2016, and 1 book published in 2015. And finally, for my color breakdown, I read 4 blue books, 3 pink books, 2 red books, 2 brown books, 2 white books, 1 black book, and 1 gray book. And those are all of my stats for this month. I had so much fun putting the stats page together. Something about the spring colors just brings me nothing but joy. But I hope that you enjoyed hearing my stats for the month. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the books that I read. The very first book that I read this month started this month off with a bang, and I read my first 5-star, and that was Blended by Sharon M. Draper. This was my one and only middle grade for the month, and this was just so freaking cute. This book follows Isabella, who is 11 years old and is living a very broken life at the moment. Her parents are just getting divorced and she is now bouncing between houses, struggling to figure out how to kind of split herself in two and become the person that her mom wants her to be and become the person that her dad wants to be when she's in their respective houses. She's also really struggling with her identity as a black individual, especially around her friends. She doesn't know if she's black enough to hang out with the black people, white enough to hang out with the white people, and how she fits into her community. I thought this was really well done. I know a lot of people really didn't enjoy this book. I, however, found that it hit me in the feels a lot more than I was expecting. A lot of this main character's experiences were my experiences growing up. I grew up in a broken household. My parents were divorced. I bounced between households all the time. And I was often called whitewashed because I grew up with a white family and that's how I acted and spoke and talked. And so when I hung around with people that lived and breathed black culture, I never felt like I fit in. And when I hung out with white friends, I obviously never felt like I fit in. So I felt like this was a very representative book of my own growing up experience. So I feel like I resonated with this book more than most people would, but I still think that it's a really fantastic middle grade story that young readers should be reading. Talked a lot about racism and microaggressions and hate crimes and police brutality. Some of it wasn't necessarily handled the way that I would have wanted. I wish there was a few more things that were wrapped up a little bit better and addressed a little bit more, but overall I just couldn't give this anything lower than a 5-star because it really resonated with me. The next book that I'm going to talk about is a book that is in my unhaul pile, so I'm not going to go pull it out, and that is The Wedding Date by Jasmine Gilroy. I gave this one a 1 star. I hated this book so much. I actually gave it a 1.5 stars if we're being very specific, but I just really did not like this book. This book follows, I do not remember their names, follows 2 characters that meet in an elevator, and the elevator breaks down. And in their short little encounter, they have some chemistry and create a small little, back and forth relationship. When they step out of the elevator, the hero of the story asks the heroine to become a fake dating date to a wedding that he has to go to that happens to be the wedding of his best friend and his ex-girlfriend. And he does not want to show up alone. So she agrees, heck yeah, I'll do that. They go to the wedding in the first 10% of the book. Then the wedding is over, and the rest of the book you follow them flying to each other's respective states to hang out with each other and literally have sex and not talk at all and just have zero chemistry and zero ability to have adult conversations with each other. It was so frustrating. It was so misleading because you have this book that is centered around the wedding date, and for it to be over in the first 10% of the book was just not fun, exciting, fresh, or a good time for me. I really did not enjoy it. I will not be reading any more of this author's work. I do own 1 more of her books, and I'm surprised I didn't add it to my unhaul pile, but I just don't think that I jive with her writing style. Let me know if I should give any of her other books a try, but I am rightfully scorned with this one, and it makes me mad when people even mention it, saying it's some of their favorite books. I just don't get it. Everyone is able to like what they like and love what they love. I was just not one of them. Up next, I read Glass Sword by Victoria Aveyard. I don't want to talk too much about this one because I am doing a full secret TBR video for this book in particular, but I did really enjoy it. I enjoyed it a lot more than the first book in the series, which is Red Queen. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I did really enjoy it. I thought that it was really well done. I really loved the exploration of grief and trauma. I really loved the arcs between the characters and where they went and the emotional turmoil that they had to go through, but also how the author really delved into the emotional state that takes on a person. So really enjoyed this one. If you want to hear my full thoughts on my feelings on this book, I will be posting a secret TBR video relatively soon, so stay tuned for that where you can hear my full thoughts. The same thing goes for The Boyfriend Project by Farrah Roshan. This is another book that I read for that secret TBR video. I liked this well enough. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I keep looking because I know what my star rating is, but I cannot remember if I give it a half star or not. Claw Pile allows you to do both now, so if you're seeing me look over, that's what I'm looking at. But I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I thought that it was interesting. I think that the cover and the synopsis of the book is very misleading in regards to the hero's perspective and kind of what his motivations are throughout the story. However, it was good. I liked the author's writing, but I am very interested more in the side characters than the main characters, so I'm actually really excited that I picked up the second book in the series, which follows one of the females that we meet in the first book. And this book follows 3 women who got catfished by the same man, and they decide to make a pact where they are going to abstain from men for the next 6 months to focus on themselves. However, the day after they make that pact, the heroine of the story meets this hero at work, and they create a relationship. I liked it. If you want to hear, again, my full thoughts on it, feel free to check out that TBR video coming to you very, very soon. Up next, I read Wings of Ebony by JL. This is a book that I thoroughly enjoyed. I buddy read this one with my friend Mike, and we had a blast with it. I will say that not everyone is going to jive with and really connect with the writing of the story. The author really took an approach in regards to very Black-centric lingo and writing style. If you grew up in the Black hood, you know what I'm talking about when I talk about the Black lingo and the way that some of the questions and words and experiences were phrased. But other than that, I really enjoyed this one. This one follows, I'm not gonna remember her name. Her name is Ro. I was like, that is not right. The beginning of the story, she is coming back after a year being away to come visit her sister who still lives in the place where they grew up. However, a year before, their mom had died, and her father, who she had never really met, comes back out of hiding basically to take her to the secret world where she learns that she is able to connect with magic. You are unable to touch the people around you, because if you do that, then you share all of your memories with them, and because this secret magical place is unbeknownst to humans, that's basically a forbidden law to never touch anybody, or they will kill the person that found out about it. In order to save her sister, she ends up touching her and sharing all of her memories, and that kind of sets off a chain reaction of events that kind of happen that push. Is her main character's name Ro? Really? Rue. Her name is Rue? Rue. I'm confused. Rue. I keep calling her Ro, but her name is Rue. It kind of forces Rue to make some decisions and kind of push against the rules and regulations that this world lives by. But it's also a fantastic fantasy story that kind of balances the idea of a fantasy world with a urban world as well. So you kind of have this really intricate urban fantasy feel with a very distinct fantasy world on top of all that. I also liked how the author wove in the fantasy world. Instead of us learning all of the aspects to this new world alongside the main character, we kind of got flashback scenes that gave us the information that we needed to know. And some might find that like info dumpy, but I found it really interesting. Sometimes I get bogged down by following this character learning when I'd rather just like see it in glimpses. So I really enjoyed that. However, I found the main character to be quite annoying at times. She did and acted in ways that was very stupid, and she made really stupid decisions, even though some of the times she was walking into traps and it was very obvious that the author was setting it up that way. So that was frustrating, but other than that, I enjoyed it. I'm interested to see how the sequel is going to go. I believe it's only a duology, so hopefully I can get to book 2 very soon. Up next is my one and only DNF for the month, and that is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I'm not going to talk too much about this one just because I don't want to speak negatively about this book. The reason for me DNFing had nothing to do with the book itself and everything to do with the writing style and everything to do with my own personal experience. I am not the smartest tool in the shed, and so I feel like this writing style went quite over my head, and it made it very hard for me to connect with the story. And I didn't, not the story, with, yeah, it is a story. It's basically this man who is writing stories to his son about his life growing up as a Black man. It's nonfiction, and I really liked the idea of it. I think that there were some things in here that I really resonated with, but for the most part, for the writing style, the way that it was written, it went over my head, and it really hindered my experience of reading this book. And I didn't want to get to the end and give it a low rating just for it to affect the Goodreads rating, because I feel like it didn't deserve that. So I'd rather just DNF it and not rate it and understand that this one just wasn't for me. I definitely recommend it if you're looking for a good nonfiction that tells you what it's like to live a life as a Black man, but just be ready for the very lyrical, almost nonsensical way of writing that I just didn't jive with. Then I read an ebook, and I read Xeni. This is by Rebecca Weatherspoon. This is the sequel to Rafe, which was very interesting. It is a book that I wanted to like more than I did. This is a marriage and convenience story. It's a very short little book that follows Xeni, who we met in the first book. She was the heroine's best friend. And she goes to New York, I believe, to bury her grandmother who has passed away. And she finds out that her grandmother has left her all of her money and all of her houses and everything in her possession, with the caveat that she marries somebody and stays with them for a certain length of time before she can get the money. And because she is meddling in things far past her death, the grandmother also said that she has to marry a specific person. And the main character, I forget his name, but he has something to gain from this marriage of convenience as well. He needs to pay off debts to his father, so they decide to go ahead with the marriage of convenience, and of course, they fall in love from there. This is a really interesting story. It's written about a Black and a white character, so we have an interracial, fuck, why can't I say that word? Interracial couple, as well as 2 bisexual couples. So I found that very interesting. That's something I've never read about before, reading a interracial? What is the fucking word? Interracial couple. That's right? Oh my god, I feel so stupid right now. I know the word, I just don't know the word. I've never read that with bisexual characters as well. Also, Xeni is a witch, which we love that. I just found that it was very well put together. There's also some, body positivity talked about in this book. I just didn't think that the characters, oh my god. Send help. I just didn't think that the characters connected for me the same way that I that they did in the first book, and for that it fell flat for me. There was also a scene in here that involved a strap-on, which never read about before. That was very entertaining, but I don't know, I just felt like the author was trying a little bit too hard with these characters. It was like she was writing the very stereotypical perfect man for this woman that just felt like it wasn't authentic, and so for that it really hindered my experience of reading it. However, I really enjoyed it and I will read more from the author. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, but it just wasn't anything absolutely amazing. Then I read Instructions for Dancing by Nicola Yoon. I really enjoyed this one. This follows, what's her name? Evie, who is really reeling from experiencing a loss of the belief of love. Her parents have gotten a divorce and she has suddenly gained the ability to see people's beginning and ending of their relationship every time they kiss. And so she is spending this time seeing people fall in love but ultimately break up and be left heartbroken. And she is trying to figure out how to find love in a world where she knows that heartbreak is just around the corner. And during that time, she ends up at a dance studio where she is partnered up with a man named X, and they enter a dance competition together. And it's her trying to balance this ideal that relationships don't last and love is not real with this new relationship that is budding and the chemistry that she has with X. I just really enjoyed it. I thought the exploration of love and heartbreak together was really well done. I liked the melancholy aspect of the story, but also the joy that was alongside everything. This book made me cry at the very end. I was not expecting that. It was definitely a heartbreaking scene at the end that I just wasn't prepared for, but I really enjoyed it and will definitely read anything that Nicola Yoon comes out with. I do have one more book on my shelf that I have not read by her, but it was a 5 out of 5 stars for me, and I'm excited to reread it and read more of her work. I'm going to talk about these books as a whole because I do have an entire video talking about my thoughts and opinions on these books, and that is, of course, none other than House of Earth and Blood and House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. I absolutely adore these. This is a reread that I've read now for the 3rd time, and of course I read the sequel that came out this month for the first time and absolutely loved it. Gave them both 5 out of 5 stars. If you want to hear my full thoughts, spoilery thoughts, so beware of that. I do spoil the entirety of book 1 and book 2, so go into that with some caution. But if you want to hear my full thoughts on the series, then feel free to check out that video. As you can see, I tabbed the hell out of this book. I will be tabbing this one upon a reread. It was amazing. Definitely my favorite book of the year so far. Loved it. Sarah J. Maas is the queen. I lied. I DNF'd 2 books this month, and I actually rated this one because I had such strong feelings about it, and that is Your Dad Will Do by Katie Robert. This was a short little novella about a woman who breaks up with her fiance after finding him cheating with his secretary and decides to get revenge by sleeping with his dad. Now, I have no problems with that synopsis. It sounds amazing. That's the reason why I went into it, because I love a good taboo relationship. However, when I tell you this is all porn, no plot, I mean that with my whole chest, and usually I am not opposed to that, but by the 16th time of them having sex in one form or another in this short little novella book, while also bringing up his son in multiple experiences during their sexual experiences, it just wasn't right. It felt icky to me. I did not like it. Also, there was a scene that felt very much like consensual non-consent, but in the wrong ways. It almost felt like, I don't want to say this and put this out there wrong, but it felt like a grooming incident between somebody. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. I don't want to go into full depth and thoughts about it. I didn't like it. It rubbed me wrong. I got 50% of the way in and I DNF'd it. So, gave that one a 1 star. It's unfortunate because I've liked every other Katie Robert book that I have read, but that one was not it. Speaking of taboo romances that are not it, I read Bittersweet Surrender by QB Tyler. I was really excited to read another book by a self-published author that was also Black. So when I found that out, I decided to pick up one of QB Tyler's work. This just wasn't the best one for me to start with, I don't think. This does heavily rely on cheating for the entirety of the first book in the series. I will not be continuing on with the series. I don't think that it's worth it for me. But you basically follow a woman who is in marriage counseling trying to save her marriage, but then ends up falling for her marriage counselor. And the cheating goes forth through about 70% of the book. And it wasn't the cheating that drew me out of the story because I knew what it was about going in. It was just the fact that the main character and the male main character was just so gross and domineering in the wrong ways, and it just didn't jive for me. I didn't like the chemistry between the two characters. Their sexual scenes didn't feel real or authentic. I felt like they had sex more than they had conversations, and seeing as he's a therapist, that's very strange, and I just didn't enjoy my reading experience as a whole. I enjoyed some aspects of the book. I felt that some things were really good. I really enjoyed QB Tyler's writing and the way that she sets up her worlds, but it just didn't fall into place for me. I gave it a 3 stars. It was fine. I will definitely read more from QB Tyler in the future, but I just didn't love this one. Then I read The Inheritance of Orquidea Divinia by Zoraida Cordova. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I thought that it was a really well done, very interesting story. You're basically following, in the very beginning, Orquidea Divinia. You kind of follow multiple perspectives. The first perspective is Orquidea Divinia as she kind of grows up and lives her life and creates this family that is quite strange. It's also fantasy, magical realism type story, but basically at the beginning of the story, Orquidea Divinia sends out letters to her family members telling them to come to collect their inheritance because she is going to die. And they get there and she quite literally turned into a tree. Like, no exaggeration, turned into a tree in front of their eyes while she's still alive, talking with them, telling them that it's time to bounce. She's out of here. Weird and strange things start happening to the family members after Orquidea Divinia turns into a tree. Many of them have died in weird and strange ways, and the rest of the family goes on a hunt to figure out how Orquidea Divinia ended up in the place that she was, why she was such a strange and magical person, but she also had a ton of secrets. So they go on a hunt to try to figure out those secrets and uncover those secrets in order to help save as many of the remaining family members that are left. It's a very strange book. I feel like you should just go in and experience it. The writing is impeccable. It's absolutely beautifully written. I loved Zoraida Cordova's writing. I definitely want to read more from this author in the future because it was just so well done and kept me engaged in the story. The only thing that kept me from giving it a full 5 stars was there was a lot of perspectives and a lot of family members to kind of keep track of and understand, and that kept pulling me out of the story because I kept having to ask myself, who are we talking about? Who is this? So that was the only thing that kind of brought me out of the story, but other than that, it was fantastic, and I will definitely do a reread of this sometime soon. My last physical book that we have to talk about today is Bitter by Kaylanisimplyme Mezi. This is the prequel to Pet by Kaylanisimplyme Mezi, which I absolutely loved and adored in 2020, and I'm so glad that I was able to pick up the sequel on release day and read it shortly after. I really, really enjoyed this one. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. This one follows Jam's mom before Jam was ever born, but it follows her in like a high school / college situation, and you find out in the first book that Bitter is able to paint paintings, and with a drop of her blood she's able to call her paintings to life. And in this book you have the same type of metaphorical writing that you do in Pet, but this one is really following social injustice and racism as a whole, which I really enjoyed. But basically there's a lot of protesting and rioting happening in this town of Lucille where people are pushing back against the racial poverty that they live in, and they really want a better life for themselves. And Bitter is absolutely terrified of putting herself out in the world like that and pushing for change, but after something happens, she's so fed up that she ends up pulling out a monster from this painting with the hopes that he will help her kind of bring things back to equality. And things kind of divulge from there. It's a short book, so I won't talk about it too much more, but it was absolutely fantastic. So amazing. I think I still enjoyed Pet a little bit more, but I also loved the message and the writing of this book. It was absolutely fantastic. Kaylanisimplyme Mezi has a way of writing their books that is absolutely breathtaking, so I will definitely read more from them in the future, and I'm so glad that I read this. And the last and final book that we're going to talk about today is The Passing Playbook by Isaac Fitzsimons. This is a YA queer sports romance with a trans main character, and it was really well done. I liked it. It follows a boy who is kind of struggling with coming out to his new school because at his last school he came out and there was a lot of backlash and bad things that happened to him because of that. So he moved to a new school with the idea that he's not going to tell anybody that he's trans. He just wants to be a normal kid and learn how to live his life, make friends, but it's also hard when his parents are trying to shelter him from ever being hurt again, and so he ends up trying to join the soccer team to make friends, and that kind of divulges into him having to overcome his fear of being out and proud and standing up for himself in a time of need. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was cute. The romance between the two characters was well done. I enjoyed it. You also have some ideas of religion that play into here, so if you don't like talk of religion and things like that, I don't think that you would necessarily enjoy this one. I thought it was cute. I thought it was a quick read. I really enjoyed it. I don't read a ton of YA contemporary anymore, so it was a nice reprieve from some of the other books that I've been reading. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was well done, and I will definitely read more from the author in the future, and this has kind of motivated me to pick up more YA contemporary because I have read Instructions for Dancing and The Passing Playbook this month, and I really, really enjoyed them. So that's it. That's all the books that I read this month. It doesn't feel like I was talking for that long, but here we are 30 minutes later, still freaking here. But I enjoyed pretty much every book that I read this month aside from my DNF, my 2 DNFs, and the worst romance that I've read in a very long time. But other than that, it was a pretty solid month. I'd love to hear down below what you have thought of the books that I talked about today, or any of the books that you read in February. I hope that your February was fantastic. Shortest month of the year, now into March, and hopefully your reading is going swimmingly. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your March as well. If you like this video, please make sure to give it a big old thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe before you leave. And of course, leave any comments, questions, and suggestions in the comment section below. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.
Baby, turn it down.